Hello and welcome to this episode of Young and Visionary with me, Esnat Suleiman. In today's episode, I will be talking about creating a debt history. Growing up as a child, I actually thought debt was a bad thing. And the reason I thought this was because I had seen one too many examples of people who had lost property, others had lost everything they had because they were unable to pay back debt. Debt collectors came and took their property. But over time in my professional life and also now from my personal experience, I have come to appreciate that debt can actually be something very important that can help you to grow faster than you would if you were just to grow using your personal organic growth. Actually, it made me remember a story from the Bible of the widow and Elisha. For those of you who don't know this story, there was a widow who had a child and she only had enough flour and oil to last a single day. And Elisha was a prophet who had been sent by God to go to this widow's house. And Elisha told this widow to cook for him using the very last oil and flour that she had. And she did that. And after she had done that, Elisha told her to actually go and borrow jars from her neighbors, as many jars as she could. And he filled those jars up with the oil, and she had flour, and those things never ran over. But the amount of oil and flour that she could get was dependent on the number of jars that she was able to provide. So if she had only relied on her own jars, it would have limited the amount of oil that she could obtain. But she was able to go and get jars from her neighbors, and therefore was able to get more oil and flour to last her a longer period of time. So that is very similar in today's world, where sometimes for you to grow and to progress quickly, you also need to obtain debt to actually support that process. So now my understanding is that debt can play a very important role, but it depends on what you're using that debt for. And on the basis of that background, I would like to talk about how to create a credit history, because when you do have the opportunity to borrow from a bank or any other financial institution, if there's one thing that they will want to look at, it is your credit history. Now, first of all, let me start by defining what your credit history is, or what is a credit history. So basically, your credit history is a depiction or data information that shows how you have been able to handle debt in the past. Have you been able to honor the debt? How much debt have you been able to honor in the past? So when you look at it, for you to develop a credit history, it is actually important for you to actually make sure that you are borrowing, because the absence of a debt history does not mean that you're credit worthy, because financial institutions will want to see your experience with debt. So if you've never borrowed before, it will show that you have no experience with debt. They're not really able to assess your capability to pay back, so they may not be able to give you a substantial amount if you do not have a credit history. So in that case, it is important for you to develop that credit history. So even if you do have enough money at any point in time to always do the things that you need, you can start to develop that credit history by just getting small amounts of funds and then showing that you are able to pay back to the financial institution, and that will help you develop that credit history. A lot of people also are more comfortable getting informal loans. Now, informal loans do not go into your official records in terms of your capability to borrow and repay funds. So make sure that you're not only relying on borrowing from informal means such as the village banks, but that you're also borrowing from the formal means such as the banks and the financial institutions, because that is where your records will then be stored. once you have demonstrated good credit history, when you go to the bank and you want to get additional debt, you will see that they will start to offer you a higher amount of debt than you obtained the previous time. So then that will also help you to be able to do transactions that are bigger size, because now you have proved to the bank that you are able to pay back huge sums of money, even if it's not huge sums of money, but you have proven that you can be trusted with money and that you will be able to pay back. So every bank, every financial institution is required to provide data of lenders, of borrowers to the Credit Reference Bureau. So the Credit Reference Bureau is an independent party that keeps records of people with outstanding facilities, people who have defaulted. So every time a financial institution, so whether you defaulted in one financial institution, you go to another one to borrow, the record of your default from the other financial institution will also be available. So make sure that you pay back your debt. So I know of people who, for example, did not pay back their college loans. And when they wanted to get a facility from the bank, they were unable to access it because their records indicated that they had not paid back a previous loan, or they had actually defaulted on a loan. So it doesn't matter how small the loan is, you should make sure that you pay back the loan so that it can reflect positively in your credit history. Well, that is where we wrap up today's episode. I hope that through this episode you've been able to appreciate the importance of having a good credit history that would enable you to then have access to debt. In another episode, I will now start to talk about what are some of the beneficial things that you can do with debt to make sure that the debt helps you to progress and to improve your financial well-being. Have a good day.